My name is Kasia, and I direct the Global Drug Policy Program here. There are a number of our other colleagues here as well. I hope you will get to say hi to them. So June 26th is a day where that UN declared as a day to fight drugs. It has a complicated name, and what we've tried to do with a number of our grantees and partners across the world is to sort of reclaim take the opportunity to reclaim the dialogue around drugs and drugs policy, and actually to present a different view of relating to drug use, relating to drug production, relating to drug policy issues. And one way to do that is to engage in those discussions by using art. This is our first opportunity to do so here at OSF. Let me welcome you warmly. SOZE is our partner organization that is putting it together with us. So I will hand over to Devine to introduce everyone. Again, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to Open Society Foundations for giving the opportunity and the voice to artists. Thank you to our artists, and a special thank you to Jamila Mohammed Hooker, who curated this program today. Paul Robeson once famously said, "Artists are the gatekeepers of truth." We are here today to expose those truths, to humanize social struggle, and actualize our grievances and fears. Art is more than just a tool to help us achieve these goals. It is the lens through which we view them, the voice through which we demand them, and the universal language through which we all understand them. Without art, without free art, we are lesser equipped to take action and change lives. The artists here today work in all kinds of mediums, but they have a common goal: to give voice to those most impacted by the world drug problem. We have here today Andre Trainer and Work, who are two visual artists working on a mural series in the Bronx, Harlem, and Brooklyn. We have Baz Dreisinger, who is an author of Incarceration Nations, A Journey to Justice in Prisons Around the World. We have Sebastiano Vitale and his band to do a musical performance, and we have Shannon Metesky, a spoken word artist. I'd like now to introduce our two visual artists to share with you all the work they've been doing for the last couple weeks on their murals. So please welcome to the stage Andre and Work.
I guess since I got up here first, I'll speak first. I don't know if there's any slides we're looking at. Oh, well, there we go. So this is the mural I'm currently working on in the Bronx on the back of Fannie Lou Hamer High School, which is visible from the Sheridan Highway. It was inspired by a quote I found, and so I don't mess it up, I'm going to read it out of my phone. The quote is, "The balanced happiness of a country is the result of the accomplishment of justice." And I thought that quote was very powerful, and I was looking for something that kind of showed balance and humility, and this was what I came up with. This is another piece that I guess is finished, that me and Alice Mizrahi did in Harlem on 99th Street between 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue. I did the father and son. The cityscape was done by Alice and some of her assistants. The father and son the father I went to high school with, great father. I'm always looking to celebrate people while they're living, and when I started doing murals, it was always rest in peace murals, and I feel like it's a lot better to celebrate people while they're living, so I'm looking forward to doing more of that. This mural of me and my son in the Bronx on the back of the Claremont Community Center. It didn't start off as being a portrait of me and my son. It went through several incarnations, but this is how it ended up, and I'm very happy with it. Once again, just trying to celebrate fatherhood, and I think too many times we don't see fathers and children, and definitely don't see those tender moments between father and children, so I wanted to show something different. And here we go.
Hello, I'm Work, and the slide before us is work in progress at PS 81 in Bed-Stuy. And my design is titled Nature Within. I wanted to create something that wasn't as heavy due to the site location. And it depicts a child holding a flower, similar to a lotus flower, but based in sacred geometry. And it tries to speak on the fact that nature is within us. And so the way I see, drugs and drug policy is definitely a big problem due to the fact that there's no education at the base level, because all of that nature is within us. I mean, when we go to sleep or when we die, our brain drops DMT. There's cannabinoid receptors in our brain. And so the history of the criminalization of drugs is primarily based for me as a subjugation of the other. And so I think the solution lies in being educated about nature and its properties and how to use them and not abuse them. And so that's what my design is about. Mm-hmm. Hope to finish it today.
Thank you both. I've seen them in person. They are truly incredible. And tomorrow we are doing 2 mural unveilings with community events. The one in Brooklyn is at 10 a.m. with the school. They have their orientation. We'll have DJ, food, drinks. And the second one is in Harlem. So we can send around those details and have them available after the program. But it'll be really special to come celebrate the murals with the community. So thank you all. Next, we have Baz Dreisinger, author of Incarceration Nations, A Journey to Justice in Prisons Around the World.
Hi. Hello, everybody. So it's great to be here today. It's always great to be at OSF, and it's great to be among artists and people working across the disciplines in so many different fields, because that is very much what I do. I'm an author, I'm a writer, I'm a professor, I'm an activist. I also produce segments on music for NPR, and I work in film, and most recently am developing an identity as a visual artist too, which is kind of weird and exciting. So it's always nice. Art is thus very much at the center of what I do. And so what I wanted to do today, really briefly, is take you on a whirlwind tour around the world to prisons, and to take a look at some of the places that I visited for the book that I wrote that came out a couple months ago called Incarceration Nations. And for that book, we'll hold off on the first slide just yet. So I wrote the book because I had been working in the prison system for about a dozen years in an educational context. And initially when I started doing that, people would come and look at me and think I was crazy, basically. Why are you teaching in prisons? Why are you working with those people? And so on and so forth. And then somewhere around maybe 3-4 years ago, I stopped getting those questions. And I think it started to become publicly accepted that in so many ways, prisons are the civil rights issue of our time, that this was a mess that we had to deal with. Mass incarceration became an inordinately popular topic of conversation. And so there was so much happening, and there is so much happening, and so much momentum, and yet, which is and was wonderful, and yet I felt like there was something kind of missing from the conversation. And that's what I wanted to bring to the table with my book. And one of those things was a global context for the conversation, for looking at the way that it's not just America's addiction to incarceration that's a problem, but the way that we've exported this system globally. We've exported the concept of incarceration globally. We've exported our dysfunctional war on drugs globally. And we've exported an addiction to punishment in a global context too. And that didn't seem to be talked about quite as much as it should be. And the other thing that I had hoped to bring to the table in writing the book was a moral dimension to the conversation. There was and there is a lot of conversation about the practical impact of and the practical impracticality of a system of mass incarceration, how much it costs us, and so on and so forth. And that's real, that's true. But I think until we address the moral underpinnings of the problem, and until we talk about race and ethics and morality and really kind of unearth the moral concepts of incarceration in a more general way, we're not going to make grand change. And I think grand change is what we're after, and not just kind of tinkering away. So with that said, I started the journey in Rwanda, and we've got, I went to Rwanda because surely when I say Rwanda, I'm sure you all think of one thing, and that's genocide. And I wanted to start the book from a restorative justice framework by focusing on victims. And I wanted to think about what are the needs of victims, how do we address harm, and how do we think about a system of justice that's not grounded in revenge, but in reparations and repair. And so I went to Rwanda to look at what happened after the genocide and how the country established these grand truth and reconciliation courts called gachachas, where people were able to devise systems of reparations to make up for unspeakable, vile acts. And they were able to do so in very powerful ways. And I also wanted to go to work with the youngest survivors of the genocide. I worked with young college-age survivors who were maybe 1 or 2 years old when both their parents were murdered in the genocide. And these young people were part of an organization called Never Again Rwanda, and were really interested in visiting prisons as a show of reconciliation and a show of what is possible going forward. And so we set up a program called the Prison Visiting Project. That right there is one of the prisons in Kigali, Rwanda. The men in orange have been sentenced, and the men in pink are still in remand waiting to be sentenced. And the most powerful thing, this was the one visit, the very first visit that we made with those students who are still running the program, was that it was enormously powerful for them to go to prison where 80% of the population in prison in Rwanda is in for genocide. And these individuals, actually young people who are survivors, went in there as a gesture of peace, reconciliation, and forgiveness, which was enormously powerful. And it all goes to show you that quite often what we think victims want is not necessarily what victims actually want, and that there are other ways of thinking about this. And I continue this theme in South Africa, which was the next country. This is a restorative justice program that's happening in Pollsmoor Prison, which is a little bit like the Rikers Island of Africa. And certainly of South Africa. It's a place of gross human rights abuses where the TB transmission rate is 90%. The government owes $1 billion in damages to people to formerly incarcerated people for the amount of rapes and assaults that go on in Pollsmoor. It's a facility where you have 40 to 45 people in a given cell, men, women, and children, almost 10,000 people, many of whom are awaiting trial. It's a really clearly very atrocious place. And yet in the midst of that, one of formerly incarcerated man has set up a pretty powerful restorative justice program where the individuals in prison are able to confront their victims and to confront family members whom they've harmed in the context of their lives and in the context of their belonging to gangs and being engaged in all of the cultures of the townships in South Africa, and yet at the same time recognize the ways that they're also victims through this whole thing. And at the end, they get to confront victims and potentially have that impact parole decisions and thus actually be able to bring people home and bring people home in the context of healing. So it's a pretty incredible thing to see that connects back to Rwanda in terms of how can we make reparations and reconciliation substitute for revenge in our justice system. From there, this is a scene from the prison, Luzira prison in Uganda, another place full of vile atrocities in terms of human rights abuses. The bulk of people are in here for small, petty crimes of theft for which they can't afford to pay the bribe, and which is very much how the system works. It's so overcrowded that people are sleeping standing up. And I went to Uganda to obviously witness that, be a witness to that, and write about it, but also to start a creative writing program and think about the role that art plays in justice and the healing work that writing and narrative and truth-telling and painting and drama, all of that, the role that it can potentially play even in a place that's as close to hell as Luzira prison is. And so it's worth thinking about the role that taking control of the pen and your own narrative can have in promoting healing and also in promoting sanity, in a sense, in a place, at least for the time being, that is as insane as Luzira prison. From there, this is actually continuing on the theme of the arts in prison. This is the prison in the General Penitentiary in Kingston, Jamaica. And what's incredible actually about this photo is that when you look at it, it could be any prison anywhere. You might think it's New York State if you've been upstate to any of the prisons. This looks the same way. And that's not an accident, and that's because, again, as I was talking about earlier, we have reproduced this system. We created the first modern prisons, the US, in the early 19th century, based on these European ideas. And then the rest of the world came to see them and reproduced them on their shores. And this happened by way of, first, obviously, the colonial powers came, and then these were also foisted upon the various colonies. So what you have, basically, is the same model being reproduced, even in a culture and in a country where it doesn't fit. I mean, clearly the same justice model should not apply all over the world in exactly the same format. In GP is, again, horrifically overcrowded. It was built for 650 people and it holds 1,700. And the individuals are only out of their cells for 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours a day. There are no toilets in the cells. So, and I could go on. The program that I went to see there was, again, related to the arts, and that's a small reggae music program. And what impact, again, can this tiny little lifeline of sanity that is art have in the context of a hellhole like this one? So from there, I went to Thailand, and this right here is Ratchaburi Women's Facility in Thailand. Thailand is a place where women are deeply impacted by the criminal justice system on account of the war on drugs. There are about 25,000 women in prison in Thailand, and 21,000 or so of them are in for drug-related crimes. And up to 80% of those women had co-defendants, and most of those co-defendants were husbands and boyfriends. And so in many ways, Thailand is representative of this fastest growing segment of our prison population, that's women, because they are obviously hapless foot soldiers who get caught up in the war on drugs in connection with relationships in their lives, and then sometimes get caught up in addiction as well, and this leads to incarceration. So it's a highly dysfunctional cycle at which women sit at the heart. And the Princess of Thailand has taken it up to make this her issue. And so she started an NGO that I went out to work with and witness what she was doing with these women, creating what she calls kind of model prisons, which is a little bit of an oxymoron, actually a lot of an oxymoron. There is no model prison. But she's building centers that are a little bit more like kind of maternal family reunification centers than the traditional Thai prisons. So here you've got the women doing origami. They do origami, yoga. They are actually getting training in various career fields and computers and massage. So there's something of a glimmer of hope that the princess is trying to bring to the situation around women. The princess, incidentally, is also responsible. She was the main motivating force and coordinating force behind the Bangkok Rules, which is trying to, again, promoting a system of standards for women in prison around the world and their special needs. So next, this is, again, this looks like it could be anywhere because no accident, it's a Supermax prison modeled after our own in Catanduvas, Brazil. Supermaxes are, which were invented in the 1980s here, which rely on this brutal system of solitary confinement that we hear quite a bit about, supermaxes are an American invention that have now been reproduced in at least a dozen countries, and Brazil is one of them. Brazil is, if you've been following the scandal there, you know that Brazil does not have the money to be building billion-dollar prisons, and yet it is. It has 5 supermax prisons for what it claims to be the worst of the worst. And what a phrase like that means is obviously, very much up for debate. But they're locking people in solitary for 23 hours a day in these places, a practice we know is in gross violation of human rights, and we know is the cause of madness, profound, irreparable psychological and physical harm. So I spent some time thinking about the evils of solitary and the proliferation of the supermax system around the world, again, modeled after our own. A couple more countries. This is a museum that is in Australia. It's in Western Australia. It's a very famous prison in Perth called Fremantle that's now a museum, was operative until the 80s. I spent time in the prisons of Perth, for one, to look at the gross racial disparities that you see there in terms of the Aboriginal population filling the prison systems, particularly among young Aboriginal youth in Western Australia, which has the highest rate of young Aboriginal incarceration in the country. And the other thing I wanted to think about in Australia was private prisons, that the boogeyman that we all those of us who think even a little bit progressively can recognize the problem of privatizing the industry. And I think the biggest takeaway there's a lot to say about the evils of private prisons and the way that we give them enormous control over our legislation in ways that are terrifying. But I think the key to remember there is capitalism and justice have always had a very ugly and deep-seated relationship. And even our state system, which is not private, is so caught up in the web of capitalism by way of phone calls and industries. Whole Foods is tied in with the prison system in terms of tilapia farming. That was a big controversy. So I would just urge everyone to, if you're going to rage about private prisons, rage about state ones too, because it's all caught up in the same very unholy mix. Australia has the highest number per capita of people in private prisons. Over 30% of their prison population is in private prisons, and 100% of its immigration detention centers are privatized too, which might say something about its increasingly draconian immigration laws, right? Obvious relationship there. Second to last country I went to was Singapore, and Singapore is a country we know of as being extremely draconian in its, again, primarily in its drug laws. You can end up in prison for life in Singapore for having the keys to a place that has drugs in it, whether it's yours or not, among many other things, including posting on Facebook and eating durian fruit on the subway. You can land in prison for those things. So draconian sentencing policy, especially around drugs. There's essentially no legal rehab. If you go to the hospital and you OD in Singapore, they are under legal obligation to report you, and you're likely to end up in prison. So if you OD, you're not going to go to the hospital, clearly. So there's a terrible, terrible crisis there happening in terms of punishment, again, very much modeled after our draconian drug laws. But the one kind of glimmer of hope there is they have a very powerful reentry project for people coming home from prison. They're very good at finding jobs and creating industries for individuals coming home from prison, and they have an entire campaign that this one ad is from around the acceptance of formerly incarcerated people. It's called the Yellow Ribbon Project. And so you have an ad like this that is on a bus stop in Singapore, and you have TV ads, you have Yellow Ribbon Month during which there's concerts and runs, and it's all about changing the narrative. And I think, again, this is where art comes into play. How do we change the narrative around thinking about who's in prison and what the purpose of prison is? So Singapore is doing something really interesting there. And I end on a pretty optimistic note. Yes, that's prison. That's Norwegian prison. That's Bastøy Island. It's a famous prison along the lines of the open prison model that was developed in Scandinavia, that's used throughout Scandinavia, also used in parts of Europe now, Germany, Amsterdam. An open prison is what it sounds like. You can go, incarcerated people there can go and come and work jobs in the community. They have home leave with their families, all based on this principle that you lose your liberty, but you don't lose your other rights, and it benefits everyone for people when they're in prison to remain connected to communities and not severed from them such that the reentry process becomes impossible. And so this is a very extreme example of an open prison because it's quite magnificent. It's run like an ecological commune, basically. But there are open prison models that are replicable, I think, around the world. And it's certainly very positive and forward-thinking to consider how we might implement that here. And so I leave you with, clearly seeing these snapshots and quick windows into these awful places, with the exception of Norway to some degree, should leave us with a great deal of pessimism about everything that's happening. And yet, at the same time, I think it's really important as artists, as thinkers, as visionaries, as justice workers, as advocates, to think about cultivating optimism and possibility, to recognize that there is definitely the horror of what is and the legacy of a structurally racist system that produced that across the board, whether we're talking about our system, our racist system here in the US, or the system that incarcerates Black and colored individuals in South Africa, or the Aboriginal people in Australia, or the Hill people in Thailand, all of whom are experiencing versions of the same structurally racist system that was built to incarcerate them and use them as a labor force. Yes, that's all a reality, and yet still, one of the incredible things about this journey and this work is that you see so much happening on a daily basis that's trying to move past that and trying to build on that towards a future that is otherwise. And I just got some pretty phenomenal news. Today is a pretty historic day, and I run a program at John Jay called the Prison to College Pipeline. We offer college courses inside, and then students are guaranteed a slot in CUNY upon release. Shout to our first graduate in the audience. Yes. So, and we just actually got word that we were selected as one of 67 colleges to be federally funded as part of Obama's new Second Chance Pell Grant initiative. And that is for which they're advertising 12,000, it's all over the news, 12,000 incarcerated students. Additional incarcerated students will now have the opportunity to pursue higher education thanks to that. And it was an amazing, I watched the press conference and watched the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Education and the Secretary of Housing sit there and talk about undoing the mess that we've made in ways that, literally made my jaw drop that this was happening here and now. So the key is to maintain that, that reality check of what was and the damning force of history, but still recognize all that's possible and all that we can envision as what could be. So I'll leave you on that optimistic note. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. And something I know that I've heard you say before that I love so much is having optimism is an act of justice. It's a practice of justice, and I do believe that to be true as well. So thank you for that reminder. Up next, we have Sebastiano Vitale and his band, and they will be doing a musical performance for us. Welcome, Sebastiano.
We are trying to put together the band. One second. So I can tell you a little bit about the project. And sorry if I check the phone, but I have something that I want to read. Okay. I'm coming. I wasn't ready. Now I am. So some years ago, I've been to Bolivia, shooting a documentary about cocaine production. It was like my first experience on the field, let's say, and it changed radically my life. And I've been almost obsessed by the story for a long time. And I did a documentary, I wrote it in form of novel, and then after a while I wanted to do something else, something more, to reach a different audience, to tell the story in a different way, and to bring it in different contexts, because when you do it in documentary festivals or whatever, you reach a certain kind of people, but I want the story and the message to reach a really different audience. So I put it together in form of a music show, and it's very hard to define because there is not yet a word to define what we are doing now. Because it's in between a documentary, a music show, a theatrical piece. So what you're seeing is a kind of work in progress. And yeah, we will go from this event we are performing today to a theatrical form. And I hope you will enjoy it. So I worked on the text and on the concept of the project with a Bolivian cocaine producer that is actually a big friend of mine. And I texted him saying, okay, we are going to perform it in New York. He was excited. Then I didn't hear from him, and yesterday night he wrote me this text and he asked me to read it for you. So that's why I'm checking the phone. So the text saying, it's in Spanish, I will try to translate it in real time. As you can see from my accent, I'm not that skilled in English, but I will do my best. So he told me, 1 second, it's important. Causation Coca, that means Viva la Coca, I think you can understand it, was the slogan of a lot of brothers that died fighting for a little land where we could grow coca. It's called Cato. And for a little bit of hope and for a little bit of bread. We didn't have any other options than work with cocaine because my father did it and because it was what I had to do. There are a lot of things that I never knew and I will never know, and I would give all the money I did producing drugs to know those things. I never had a friend. I have never been at school. I do not have any idea about what means love someone. I only need how to make cocaine, how to smuggle it, and how to sell it. I am a drug lord and drug trafficker, and I live out of coca. And then he told me something I didn't know, that he wrote the text together with a friend of him called El Gira, that means like the tour, because the guy wanted to be a singer and go on tour. Sadly couldn't make it, and so this friend asked me to dedicate the show to this guy called El Gira, and here we do it. So enjoy. And I hope you will like.
is Simon. I was born in Villa Tunari, a small village in Bolivia. I wanted to be a teacher or a priest, but I am a cocaine producer, like the vast majority of the people in my land, the Chapare. Where I grew up, being a narco trafficker is a normal thing. Like being a lawyer, like being a carpenter. Some of the things that I saw, nobody has ever talked about. And I am here today to share them with you. I want you to know how it happens that a paradise is turned into hell to satisfy the vices of many and to enrich the few peoples that let us live like dogs, surrounded by death, coca, and cocaine. We got in the car with Don Jose and drove towards Teterazama, a village an hour north from Chipiriri. We arrived in an old house. We got a lantern, cigarettes, alcohol, and walked for nearly 2 hours in the jungle. And I was 14. We arrived in a strange place, covered by plastic sheets. And we were received by a guy called Patron, a tall and strong guy, blind in one eye because of a tiger, he said. And we entered, and behind the curtain, I saw many familiar faces. The lady from the store next to my house, the president of the primary school, the friends from the square, the fruit sellers, and everybody was busy doing something. Someone was carrying coca leaves back to the back of the tent and put the coca in a big tub. Someone was using a big boat engine. And there were a lot of beans with coca. When they put them all, somebody shouted, "Turn it on!" The boat engine started, and all the leaves became juice. So the president of the primary school poured some acid and something else, while the ladies of the fruits were drying up this whitish paste. And the friends from the square were packing this white thing into little packages. If you wanna make some money, you have to behave, said Don Jose while he was opening a matchbox full of white powder. And I look at it and I ask, what is that? It's called drugs. Ganja, pop, coconut, coco. Who uses it gives it a lot of stupid names, but it makes you high. You won't feel tired. You won't feel hungry. You will work more, and you will talk faster. Sometimes I take a little when I'm tired. Fill the boxes, sell them, make money, and go to a brothel. If they get you, they kill you. The first time that I saw cocaine, I was 12 years old. It was Christmas time. And one night my mother sent us to bed early. And I fell asleep. And then I was woken up by a very loud sound. And I could hear the neighbors screaming. And I was scared. And I ran into my parents' room. They were kneeling in front of some policemen who were pointing their rifles at them, shouting. And I started crying. I didn't know what to do. And then I saw a white man, armed, speaking a different language. And I thought he was a hero from the movies. So I ran to him and I hugged his leg. And he kicked me away. He pushed me in a corner. And he goes to my father. Speak! My father did not speak. So he started beating him with a gun. And he started beating my mother too. Asking him where the drugs were hidden. And finally my father took them behind a tree and started digging. He pulled out a coffee-colored package that Don Jose, his best friend, brought him a few days earlier. the soldier sank a knife into the package, and the white powder came out. Okay, now tell me where is El Negro. My father shouted, "Gringo de mierda!" and he spat on his face. And the white man raised his weapon. And that's when my friend Carlito grabbed my arm and pulled me away. And we start running. We start running without stopping till the Espirito Santo River. And we jump on a canoe and we start rowing and rowing against the stream. You have 5 seconds. Run to the yard and stand to attention with your empty backpack a few meters from the bell. Fill the backpack with sand. Hurry up! In a few minutes, in the heat and the humidity of the tropical forest, number 18 has filled the backpack, and Lieutenant Kishpa orders to take the backpack and stand to attention until further notice. The backpack, filled with wet sand, weighs about 30 pounds. Soldiers from dormitory number 5, 3, and 7 will be transported by land in the heart of the jungle, about 25 kilometers from the training center. Every soldier will have a map and 6 hours to go back to the base. Every soldier has 30 pounds in their back and a jungle to cross, racing. No thoughts, no thoughts. Run across the jungle. Run. Do not feel the pain. Do not feel anything. No thoughts, no words, no alternative. That's how they train to come get me. The ladies of the fruits and the president of the primary school. to take my shirt off and take packages of cocaine to my body. Don Jose gave me $30. And there would have been other $70 waiting for me in Cochabamba. And my eyes were shining to the idea of what I could do with all those money. In an hour, I arrived in Villa Tunari, where the farmers were occupying government offices to protest against what the anti-drug forces did a few days earlier, when the police killed an elderly woman and tortured and imprisoned her daughter. The farmers were shouting for justice and death to the Yankees, throwing stones and dynamite to the police. More than 500 people started yelling, "Causa chun coca, Juanichu Yankees! Viva la coca! Death to the Yankees!" And they poured some chica for the Pachamama. They started chewing coca and drinking chica. And they began marching to block the road connecting Cochabamba to Santa Cruz. They did. Thousands of farmers were protesting against the government that did business with those who killed our people and raped our women. Those who say that without the help of special forces, the drug production would increase, when they are the very people who supervise the shipping of large amounts of drugs to their country. The police threw tear gas and started firing on the people without shelter. And the chaos stopped when the DIA helicopter started firing on the crowd. And everyone fled. And in that moment, a bullet got the back of a cocalera, and her blood splashed in my face. And her eyes were asking me for help as she was hiding behind a tree to die. And with her last strength, she embraced her child, protecting him with a cloth, and she died immediately after. And I still dream of those eyes and the tears of that baby. I was 14 and I couldn't understand how we reached the point of killing each other. The next day the news said the usual things. The police was attacked by organized group of drug traffickers, and forced to defend themselves, they fired back. And they didn't show the women and the children killed. The fight ended with 6 deaths. Alberto Garcia, 53 years old. Freddy Rojas, 10 months. Ernesto Quispe, 16. Jose Laura, policeman. 32. 4 people in intensive care. Dozens of injured. And over 160 arrests. 30 of them tortured. And I continued my journey to Cochabamba. The word cocalero started to become an insult across the country. Those who speak Quechua are fucking cocaleros. Who's bad? He's a fucking cocalero. Fucking cocalero. And hearing all these insults, I could not think anything else but that baby in the arms of a dying mother. And I wanted to shout to everyone that what happens is not what they show on TV. But who would believe me, a 14 years old boy? The presidents of my country tried to fight cocaine, but the only result they achieved was to increase the price of the drugs because more bribes had to be paid to do the very same things. They have stained their hands with our blood. They gave foreigners the power to do whatever they wanted, saying that they were heroes who came to liberate our country from drugs. And the heroes have done nothing but torture, kill, rape, and blackmail. And there have been many fights fought for a just cause based on false issues. And during those fights, a lot of cocaine disappeared. And that's when the trafficking in the streets, in the schools, in the clubs began. The drug world is a dark world, and even more obscure for a third country like Bolivia. Many people here have fallen into this darkness to escape personal problems. A quick exit. People ended up living under bridges, eating garbage, and being treated like animals. I believe that no form of war on drugs can work, really. Because it's impossible to fight corruption. And I think that if people around the world could face the uncomfortable truths behind drugs, maybe they could start looking for a different forms of entertainment. And that's just my idea.
This was Andrei Matorin, Alfredo Wenzani, Jake Leakey, Paulo Stagnaro, and Martin Gabor, and Sebastiano Vitale.
Thank you all so much. Up next, last but certainly not least, we have spoken word artist, the amazing Shannon Metesky.
Can y'all hear me all right? Fantastic. Thank you all for having me. I got to participate in the Museum of Drug Policy, which was an amazing experience. A little bit of context for this work. For all the live stream friends. So I grew up in a family that was deeply impacted by the drug epidemic in the prison industrial complex. My birth mother was a heroin abuser alongside her 6 siblings in the 70s and 80s in California. And because of that, my brother and I were then raised in foster care. And luckily, I got to be one of the siblings who made it out and have been using my work as a conduit of my own personal change, as well as a conduit to inspire others to work on their personal change. And understanding that, like, no matter what our circumstances, we don't have to be our circumstances. But it's a struggle. It is a daily process. It is a lifelong process. Especially as a young person trying to shape your identity. The only thing I knew about where I came from is that they all had been in prison or all had been affected by drugs. And for all my life and my little brother, trying to separate ourselves from that has been the journey. So this piece is part of that journey. I've been drunk. Drowning in fermented liquor, my best friend is a low-grade scotch. Only $15 a bottle, I finish 1 per week. I sip like every old grandfather in West Oakland, take stock. I keep an inventory of wine. I still go out, buy drinks. I'm very particular about my beers. I need them dark enough to hide my fears. See, my face turns red after too many. Eyes get blurry. My memory is a stop-action film. Don't ask me if I remember your name. I don't. I regret giving you my number. My phone is a cemetery of bad decisions. See, I'm proud that I've created a process without blackouts. I know how to pace and still stay twisted. Always make it home. Always enough battery to Uber. Always enough witnesses to recount my sloppy. Always wait on mercy to annul me. See, everyone in my biological family has suffered from addiction. Mostly crack, heroin. I figured mine was handled in the body count of my lovers, undercover in the shadows. I hadn't realized the other vice creeping like a hungry ex. I wouldn't say I have a problem, more of a process. Get off work, drink. Stress out, drink. Go out, drink. Work out, drink. I've been drunk. I've been brown coated on the inside. Been swimming too long from the things I don't want to hear. My tarot said moving home would not be easy, that I would not reap what I sow. Well, this journey has emotionally rotted me. So it's rotting me to succumbing to the easy way out. Because I'd rather be Blur than rejected daughter, than neglectful sister. I do not like the way I am welcome in the city I grew up in, the family I grew up in. So I drink my grief so I don't cry in front of them. After all, I'm the one who made it, even though I'd rather see my landmarks watered in watercolor street lights. I do not want to remember these days as my sad days, so I turn up on every day that ends in day I've been drunk. Sorry, y'all, technology. I do not want to remember these days as my sad days. So I turn up on every day that ends in day. Holding my drink like the neck of a good lover, holding my skirt so I don't tumble over myself on the outside like I am on the inside. I am everything my godmother was and warned me not to become. She does not know how heavy my recycling can be. How heavy recycling can be. When your insurance doesn't cover therapy, you rhapsody at the bar with strangers who smile at you because you're pretty and you know how to hold your liquor, not because they know your accolades. See, I'm trying to feel better about the amount of little girls looking up to me, so I hide in corners that are over 21 to cornerstone my sorrows in private, drunk alone, because the pressure to be proper will ruin you. The pressure of keeping it together will ruin you. So I pour my apologies into another glass before bed, before breakfast, brush my teeth so the kids and coworkers don't smell it. See, the dust don't settle in a heart like this. Fogs mostly, fucks up mostly. So I pour apologies into another glass, and I know the impact it will have on my body. This tire around my tummy has been wearing these bottles long before I emptied them, sitting like an old doll in a forgotten house for me to return to the haunting, for me to address my demons, for me to decide when enough is enough, for me to be brave enough to choose sobriety, to talk to this old ghost like an old friend, like I know addiction in my family is not a good enough excuse, but I am not ready for the dismantling, the real demolishing. I'm not ready to address my sober feelings for what they are, because in my family, we don't talk about things. At least I have enough liquid courage to write this poem. At least drunk keeps me from being disrespectful. See, I drink my way into apathy into this place. This is not the transformation intended. I know it's a problem, and I'm at my first step towards acknowledgement. And after this, you can find me at the bar. See, my doctor told me I drink too much for a woman. Well, bitch, call me sir and pass me my whiskey. I'm thirsty. I had too many friends die in 1 week. My brother is a black boy. I'm mourning. So if you want, pay my tab. Hug me. That's the least you can do with a sweet girl with a lot of shadows and hella feelings, and at least that will keep me smiling and laughing all night like nothing is happening. I won't ever even pour my issues out to you. I understand that this is a me problem, and you're just trying to be nice and buy a pretty girl a drink. Thank you. That's why we have to go analog and read off paper. Technology will let us down. In my adult journey and trying to unearth all my traumas so they don't impact my adult life, I wrote this show called She Thinks She Grown. And it is a journey as I go into college, leaving my foster home, trying to find myself, and also realizing that I had a lot of grief that I was holding on to. My birth mother died from an overdose when I was 9, and I had never really dealt with it. So this is a piece. Actually, I'm going to change my piece, but I'm going to do a piece from the show, but I'm going to do a different one. I saw an image of myself today, staring at me familiar. It was a girl, age 5, brown hair, looked like she had walked a journey tired, one arm hanging independently over her left leg. Her mother looked even more fatigued, eyelids wanting to fall, she wanting to topple over, one arm curved around her daughter in half-effort protection. See, many years prior to present, this was my mother, strung out and jittery. Use all the effort she did not want to shield me. We rode buses like that one with discounted passes. She saved every cent she could for her habit, and I huddled next to her, grateful just to have her there as mine, my mother. Yo, sometimes I send her messages through prayers, telling her I made it through college. I've never been pregnant. I finally got my place on that stage, mama. I'm an actress and a poet, and I thank her for my place in the lineage. I thank her for not holding me tight enough. I thank her for teaching me survival of the fittest at her earliest convenience, and I can still feel her. but no longer with spider veins, but with wings. And instead of safekeeping while I'm busted, she does it while I'm riding the L. Walking down the street with not a dollar in my pocket, on stage with a mic and 3,000 people watching. See, she hugs me when I hurt most. Shields me from all she never did at those times when I was 6, sitting next to her as her daughter. See, that was preparation for the struggle. Those loose grips were a testament to tomorrow's sorrow. She was preparing me, and I was getting ready. She was teaching me how to lean on my own leg like that little girl on that bus in Chicago. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shannon, so much. Thank you. This was Artists of Change. Thank you, OSF. Please use the hashtag Stop the Harm and support Don't Punish. Thank you all.